Hello, my healthy friends, Case here, and today poses an interesting question. We have had the Switch now for almost 6 years, and it's really starting to show its age. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is the latest example of the Switch just not being powerful enough. Don't get me wrong, I don't think it's exclusively the Switch's fault. Game Freak was also just plain lazy and didn't polish the game to any degree. But this is no longer just a rarity, as for the past couple of years we've seen dozens of games put on Switch, all of which are just not doing great graphically or performance-wise. This is really irritating, as otherwise these are great games just being weighed down by the hardware. So that's why I'm here today, to find out if the Switch will be replaced this year and if there even is a need for it to be. So, let's go. You most likely heard me state earlier that the Switch is just unable to perform anything anymore. But why stop the install base by launching a new console? The Switch's numbers are growing daily, and it's not out of the question for the Switch to be the second most purchased system of all time. A new console would indeed reset the install base, but this is just a sacrifice that needs to be made for the sake of the customers. We've passed 114 million people on Switch now, and these numbers are going to slow down regardless of if there's a new console or not. Especially as less and less third-party support comes, because the Switch just can't run what's being developed. Also, just because you won't reach 114 million units at launch doesn't mean that the Switch 2 is doomed from the start. Nintendo often does this weird thing where they like to be new for the sake of being new. But with numbers this high that the Switch is getting and the fact that people just want Nintendo to do the Switch again, Nintendo's in for a pretty high success story if they just do a new Switch. It'd make them seem like the good guys, giving the people what they want, which for Nintendo is a rarity. Sure, your casuals may not jump on immediately, but throw Mario Kart on there and people will buy. Of course, there's the Wii U, which met most of the criteria I just laid out, and yet it's still a massive disappointment. So, how come? I think it all comes down to how they handled the system. All the marketing was directed towards kids, who were busy playing Call of Duty or whatever it is kids play nowadays. I'm out of touch with culture, I don't know. Point is, they were only doing Blue Ocean stuff, and not giving things meant for the fans. And there's the fact that they already did this with the Wii, making this more of an issue, especially considering Nintendo just had finally gotten to 720p HD visuals, while Sony was doing 4K with cooler exclusives. To help paint a better picture of what I'm describing, think of it like this. Nintendo is an HD version of Sticker Star where fighting is meaningless and there's too much controversy over the game to make it seem worthwhile. Meanwhile, Sony has a game where you swing through a city as Spider-Man and fight bad guys, and it's a freaking open world with a great story and gameplay and combat. Play a collection of minigames that require you to have friends on the Wii U. Or you could play as a huntress shooting down giant machines with nothing more than a bow and arrow with a critically acclaimed open world. See the difference? This is where the Switch comes in, as it has the exclusives to back up the console. Sure, they may not have CG cutscenes or the deep story of Sony games, but Nintendo does their own thing that most of the industry can't touch. That being fun, polished games that are enjoyed by adults and kids alike, as well as rich gameplay experiences, legacy IPs you remember mostly from when you were a kid, and most importantly, nostalgia. Also, they have Monolith Soft, which is just what makes them a cool company. Despite the points I've laid out, there is one nagging issue to the argument of a new console coming: the Switch Pro rumors. At this point, I don't think they're even rumors, just someone saying it because everyone's saying it, and it makes you seem like a cool analyst who knows what Nintendo's gonna do next. It made sense back in 2019 when the Switch was only 3 years old and the rumors originally started. It made some sense in 2021 before the OLED, but now that it's been almost 6 years of Switch, it doesn't make sense. Lots of people think the Switch is going for 7 years, including me, so even if they just said they're starting development and are showing it off next year, I'd be fine. So no, Switch Pro will not happen, which is kind of funny to say now, as I just released my video on 2023 predictions at the time of writing. It's very humorous to hear myself saying stuff about there not being a Switch Pro when I just said that a Switch Pro will release in August. So no, the Switch Pro is not coming, but I think part of the rumors are true. I think the project was shut down for a time during COVID, then they took their Switch Pro concept and upgraded it to ship as the next Nintendo console. And then they released what they had, that being the OLED, and released it. I think the DLSS chip was true at the time, but Nintendo struck a new deal for Nvidia with a newer chip that accomplishes the same thing. So there is one other issue I should address. As you know, Nintendo has launched the Mario Kart 8 Booster Course Pass, which will be launching new Mario Kart content until sometime this year. This does affect the likelihood of a new system launching, as Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is 5 years old and they choose now of all times to launch this. It's also a similar situation for Splatoon 3. So this surely disproves the Switch's successor arriving, right? Well, it could go either way. While all these points are valid, ultimately Nintendo's gonna do what Nintendo's gonna do, and nobody's gonna know what Nintendo's gonna do until Nintendo say what they're gonna do. Now, if Nintendo is indeed making a new console, they need to make sure it's a hybrid. Everyone agrees that a hybrid needs to be the next system, as if they go back to the standard home console handheld system, I and many other fans will storm Nintendo, and Reggie and I will punch Doug Bowser in the face until they fix it. Nintendo likes to do new things even when they don't make sense, which is sometimes pretty scary. So I hope they don't switch it up. Pun intended. Then there's the matter of Miyamoto admitting he was looking into new controllers. I think they should stay with the Joy-Cons though, but with some smaller tweaks. For starters, they need to increase the size of the Joy-Cons. Nintendo made them way too small, which removes some of the functionality towards lots of people. We also need to cut out most of the features in the Joy-Cons. Nintendo crammed tons of little pieces of tech into this thing, making a single pair cost $70. Now, I would be fine with the price if it were validated, but unfortunately for us, Nintendo is making us pay for a bunch of features we will never use. Out of everything in the Joy-Cons, only two things are actually needed: motion controls and HD rumble. Nintendo doesn't use any other capabilities of the Joy-Cons except maybe the IR sensor. The last things we need fixing with the Joy-Cons is drift. But this is something barely worth discussing today, as many have talked about this and have gone into much greater detail than I probably ever will. But, mark my words, Nintendo, the number one thing that needs to get fixed is drift. People are tired of dealing with it, and it's a shady business practice. The Switch is a system that has touched all of our hearts despite its many issues. So, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what system we get as long as Nintendo still puts its magic in it. So, my friends, have a wonderful day.